10 years ago, on this exact stretch of tarmac in the Austrian mountains, Lewis Hamilton won a Grand Prix by colliding with his own teammate on the final lap, and then stood on the podium and listened to thousands of people boo him. This year, on the very same circuit, he could win the very same race without having to fight almost anyone for it at all. Same track, same driver, same trophy lifted into the same alpine sky, and yet almost nothing about it is the same. And the reason why should genuinely frighten every other driver on the grid. Because here is the part nobody is saying out loud. In 2016, Hamilton won at the Red Bull Ring because he was the most dangerous man in Formula One, ruthless, untouchable, willing to risk everything. In 2026, he might win because he is simply the last man left standing. Something has quietly happened to this sport over the past few months. Something that has almost nothing to do with Hamilton suddenly getting faster, and almost everything to do with the entire world around him getting weaker, slower, and more fragile. And the strangest part is that the clues have been hiding in plain sight at this one circuit for an entire decade. To understand what truly changed, you have to go back to that final lap in 2016. Because the teenager standing on the podium directly behind Hamilton that afternoon is now the dark center of this entire story. So let me set the scene, quickly, because the speed of what happened matters. It is June 2026. Formula One has just detonated its own rulebook, with a new chassis, new engines, and an entirely new philosophy built around electrical power. Mercedes read the new world perfectly. A 19-year-old named Kimi Antonelli walked in and won the first 4 races of the season. And what was supposed to be a championship turned into something closer to a coronation. By the time the paddock arrived in Spain, Antonelli's lead looked less like an advantage and more like a fortress wall. Meanwhile, Hamilton, 41 years old, in his second season wearing Ferrari red, chasing a record 8th world title that most people had quietly filed away as impossible, had not won a single race for his new team. 7 rounds, 0 wins. The whispers had already started. And then Barcelona happened. In Spain, Antonelli was leading. Comfortably, the race looked finished. And then, with only 3 laps remaining, his Mercedes simply stopped. A technical failure out of nowhere, surrendering the lead and the win in a single heartbeat. Hamilton was perfectly placed to pounce, because earlier in the race his pit wall had committed to an aggressive 3-stop strategy, gambling at the exact moment another car broke down and triggered a virtual safety car. The gamble landed. Hamilton swept through to take his first victory for Ferrari, the 106th of his career. The oldest man on the grid, written off by half the paddock just weeks earlier, suddenly sliced the championship gap down to 41 points, with 16 races still left to run. But here is the real problem with that victory, and it is the single thing that makes this Austrian weekend different from any preview you will read anywhere else. Hamilton did not win in Barcelona because Ferrari had the fastest car. By most accounts, Ferrari were not even close to the quickest package on raw pace. He won because the fastest car broke, and because he was positioned to capitalize the instant it did. And that right there is the secret buried underneath the entire 2026 season. To actually see it, you first have to understand what these new cars really are. So let me explain it the way the drivers feel it in the cockpit, not the way the engineers write it on a whiteboard. Picture yourself driving flat out toward a long, high-speed corner. In the old cars, you committed. You trusted the downforce pressing the car into the road, and you carried huge speed through the apex on pure faith. In these new 2026 machines, you cannot do that anymore. The engine now leans on its battery nearly as heavily as it leans on its fuel. And that battery has to be constantly recharged, which means that on the very fastest, most thrilling parts of a circuit, the places where a great driver used to feel like a god, he now has to lift off the throttle early and coast, just to feed the electrical system enough energy to survive the next straight. One of the most respected veterans on the grid flatly called this the Battery World Championship. The reigning champion said these are the worst cars Formula One has ever built. And the 4-time world champion, the undisputed king of this very circuit, has spent the entire season repeating that the cars simply are not fun to drive. Here is what all of that means in plain language. The new rules made every single car more fragile and more fiddly to drive. The teams that built smooth, reliable, well-balanced machines, Mercedes first and Ferrari second, are flourishing. The teams that always lived on raw aggression and knife-edge downforce are drowning, and the racing itself has fundamentally changed character. When two cars fight now, it is frequently not a question of who is braver into the corner. It is a question of who has more battery left at the exit. One car explodes out of a turn at full electrical power, while the other is gasping, almost crawling, desperately saving energy, and a gap that did not exist a second earlier simply appears, like a magic trick. And that is why the cleverest driver now beats the bravest one. The man who knows exactly when to attack and when to hide, when to spend his battery and when to hoard it, is suddenly worth more than the man who simply hurls the car at the corner and prays. Reputations built on fearlessness count for almost nothing in a formula that quietly punishes aggression and rewards calculation. Now watch what happens next, because this is exactly where the story stops being technical and turns brutally personal. Remember that podium in 2016? The teenager standing one step behind Hamilton, collecting only the second podium of his young career on his home soil. In front of an ocean of fans who had traveled across a continent to worship him? That was Max Verstappen. And for the better part of the following decade, Verstappen did not just race well at this track, he owned it. Red Bull and Verstappen won 6 consecutive Austrian Grand Prix between 2018 and 2023. This circuit was their fortress, their cathedral, their mountain carved into the Styrian hills and painted in their colors. And in 2026, on the precise weekend Formula One returns to that fortress, Max Verstappen sits 7th in the championship, winless, frustrated, dragging around a Red Bull that has slipped to become one of the slowest cars among the front-running teams. The empire did not crumble slowly over years. It collapsed in a single winter, the very moment the regulations changed. But it runs far deeper and far darker than a handful of lost races. Because buried inside Verstappen's contract is a clause that almost nobody was ever supposed to discuss out loud. Stay with me here, because this next part is the real reason this particular weekend matters so much. When Verstappen signed his current deal, he was so deeply uneasy about these 2026 regulations, so genuinely afraid that the sport would reinvent itself and leave even mighty Red Bull stranded behind, that his management insisted on writing in an escape hatch. A performance clause. The reported mechanism is brutally simple. If he is not sitting inside the top 2 of the Drivers' Championship by a defined point around the middle of the season, he is free to walk away from a deal that otherwise runs all the way to 2028. He feared this exact nightmare years before it arrived. And now it is unfolding almost word for word, as if he had written the script himself. So sit with what is actually happening here. The summer window in which that clause comes alive is now only weeks away. Verstappen is 7th, far adrift, with no realistic mathematical path back into the top 2 in time. His own manager has now publicly confirmed that the clause exists, and openly admitted that a decision on Verstappen's future could arrive soon, possibly even before the summer break. Reports out of Germany claim Red Bull's leadership is so terrified of losing their talisman that they are seriously weighing whether to pay tens of millions simply to buy the clause out of the contract and slam the escape hatch shut. And here is the question the entire paddock is whispering but refuses to say on camera. Is Max Verstappen about to leave the only Formula One team he has ever driven for, or is he about to leave the sport altogether? What would you do if you were him, sitting in a car that no longer feels fun, watching a 19-year-old shatter the records you set, with the freedom to walk away on your own terms? Would you stay and fight? Or would you go? And this is the exact point where 2016 and 2026 finally crash into each other. Because the Red Bull Ring is not a neutral piece of asphalt. It is Red Bull's home, a circuit shaped around the kind of car the team always wanted to build, with explosive high-speed corners, aggressive curbs to attack, and raw downforce rewarded above all else. And every one of those traits is precisely what these new 2026 cars punish the hardest. The very things that once made this track an unbreakable Verstappen fortress are the things the new rules quietly turned into his greatest weakness. The track did not betray him. the sport did. And this completely changes how we have to read Hamilton's story. Because in 2016, Hamilton conquered this circuit by sheer force. He outdrove, outfought, and finally collided his way past a teammate who was at the absolute peak of his own powers, and he took the win even as the grandstands jeered him. In 2026, the circuit that once demanded a warrior now rewards something almost opposite: patience, mechanical sympathy, tire management, and the cold discipline to nurse a fragile, temperamental car all the way to the flag. And who on this entire grid possesses more of exactly that than a 41-year-old with 106 wins and absolutely nothing left to prove? That is the deeply uncomfortable truth this weekend drags into the light. Hamilton's resurgence is not really the story of an old champion suddenly rediscovering his raw speed. It is the story of Formula One itself changing the very definition of speed and, almost by accident, building a sport perfectly suited to the oldest, most patient, most strategically ruthless driver in the field. So let me ask you straight. Do you believe Lewis Hamilton is a genuine title threat again? Or did the championship just hand him a lifeline built entirely out of other people's misfortune? And here is where it gets even worse for everyone trying to chase him down. Antonelli, the runaway leader, has now seen 2 retirements emerge inside the Mercedes garage across just a handful of races. A car that looked utterly unbreakable a month ago suddenly carries question marks. If that fragility turns out to be real, a genuine pattern rather than a streak of bad luck, then a 41-point lead can evaporate far faster than anyone wearing silver wants to admit. Suddenly, the coronation starts to look like a knife fight. And the one man best built for a long, brutal, patient knife fight might be the very driver nobody saw coming. There is a second front to this war too, and it sits inside Hamilton's own garage. His teammate Charles Leclerc retired from that same Barcelona race, and Ferrari now face the oldest and most dangerous question in the sport. When 2 drivers share a car capable of winning, who does the team actually build its season around? A revived Hamilton, suddenly only 41 points from the lead, scrambles every neat assumption Ferrari may have made about their own hierarchy. And the way they answer that question in the coming weeks could decide far more than just one race in the mountains. And there is a cruel twist waiting for Verstappen even if he does decide to leave. The most dominant car in Formula One right now is the Mercedes, and he has been linked with that seat for 2 seasons running. But that seat is occupied by the very teenager who is currently burying him in the standings. The fastest escape route is blocked by the person he would most want to escape. The king of this mountain has spent a decade beating everyone in front of him, and now the one chair that could save his career already has a 19-year-old sitting in it. So even his way out is no longer simple, and that is what makes this summer so dangerous for everyone involved. So what does Austria actually decide? On the surface, it is just one Grand Prix on a short, fast, breathtaking ribbon of track in the hills. Underneath, it is a referendum on the entire shape of this new era. If Hamilton can deliver again here, on a circuit that historically never suited him, in a car that on paper is slower than the Mercedes, then it tells us Barcelona was no fluke gifted to him by a broken rival. It tells us this championship is genuinely, dangerously, thrillingly alive. And if Verstappen's exit clause does activate in the weeks that follow, this weekend could one day be remembered as one of the last times we ever watched him race a Red Bull at the team's own home race. Picture that for a moment. The very track that crowned him as a teenager becoming the place historians point to as the beginning of the end. The orange sea filling those grandstands, roaring for a future that may have already quietly slipped away. Do you honestly think Verstappen ever wins another race for Red Bull? Or has that door already closed without anyone announcing it? So here is where it all lands. 10 years ago, Lewis Hamilton won the Austrian Grand Prix because he was the most ferocious competitor in the sport, and he took what he wanted by force, booze and all. This year, if he wins it again, it will not be because he somehow became that man once more. It will be because Formula One rewrote its own rulebook, made the cars fragile and joyless, drained the magic out of its fastest and bravest drivers, and quietly dismantled the empire that used to rule this mountain. leaving the door wide open for the one driver disciplined and patient enough to simply walk through it. Hamilton did not get faster. The system made everyone else slower, more fragile, and more uncertain. That is the hidden truth of 2026. The same trophy, the same track, the same driver, and a completely, fundamentally different reason for winning. If this changed the way you see this season, do me one favor. Drop a comment telling me who you think actually wins this title, Hamilton, Antonelli, or someone we have not even mentioned yet. And subscribe, because the next handful of races might be the most important of the entire decade. The fortress has fallen. The only question left now is who is brave enough or patient enough to finally claim it.